Ready to go anytime you are.
Welcome to One Work, Five Questions with Donna Vitek and Dr. Mark Andrew Holowchak. Thank you for
Hello.
joining us tonight, Dr. Holowchak.
How you doing? We're gonna finish up our Valentine's Day special here. I'm sort of looking forward to this. I really like to talk about Maria Cosway.
Oh, okay. Yes, I am looking.
She's captured my heart, even though she's dead.
Wow. Well, that's a big deal. Holy smokes. That's
Oh,
that's a real big deal. Um, Wow. Well, today we're doing the Head and Heart Part 2. So you can find Part 1 on our YouTube channel. And today it's a letter from Maria Cosway to Thomas Jefferson, dated the 24th of September, 1824. But before we start, I have to give Dr. Holowchak's credentials. I must. So those of you who are using these videos as a reference in your papers, you can say that he is a retired professor of philosophy and history, and he's
look
taught
who
at
joined us as usual.
Jeffy. He's going to
We
make the
heard your
true
voice.
Jefferson.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He's taught at the University of Pittsburgh, University of Michigan, Rutgers University, Camden, Ohio University. He's the editor of Journal of Thomas Jefferson in his time and the author editor of numerous Thomas Jefferson books, which can be found in the video description. He also has close to 155 essays on Thomas Jefferson, all very well written. I haven't read all of them, but the ones I have read are fantastic, and I've read them multiple times. So, and like I said, you can find the list of books and where to find his essays in the video description. With our show One Work, Five Questions, I'll ask Dr. Holowchak 5 questions on one work of Thomas Jefferson. And today we will finish our Head and Heart. And I'm very curious about this because a lot of time has passed. So just a brief introduction.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing the last letter in their correspondence, right?
Okay, so we did the Head and Heart last week. This week is the last letter in the correspondence between the two. So today is part 2 of the other love of Thomas Jefferson's life. We're skipping forward to the last piece of correspondence between the two, which was written by Maria Cosway 38 years after Jefferson's Head and Heart letter. That's a long time.
A long, long time.
That's a very long time. What has been going on between these two for all of these years? That was my first question, 38 years. But we are going to find out today. I'm Donna Vitek, and this is One Work, Five Questions.
That's the very same number of years that Jefferson was supposed to be having sex with Sally Hemings. Wow. Just an aside,
Oh, 38 years, really?
yeah, between the two, and no one ever knew anything about it, right? It was
Yeah,
so secretive. Anyways, that's an aside.
right. Okay. So this is Maria Cosway that we have on the screen. So are you ready for question number 1, Dr. Holowchak?
I certainly am.
Okay. Question number 1. We're doing something a bit different, a letter of a correspondent, Maria Cosway, to Jefferson, instead of a letter of Jefferson to another. She has a school for Catholic girls in Lodi, Italy, and she's painting the 4 corners of the world. And she wants a description of Monticello and the seminary. What happens?
Well, she doesn't get one. That's what happens. Jefferson
Well,
never writes back. I don't know why. No one knows why. You'll see by the correspondence. I think I sent you a number
yeah.
of all the list of the letters between them, and by the time he gets politically active, he's not writing very often to her. She's writing fairly consistently to him. He's a busy man.
Right.
Now, this is something that I'll explain. It sort of breaks my heart that he never. And I say this because in her last, let me look at the chart. In her last, from 1819 to 1824, she writes 5 letters. Jefferson only writes 2.
2.
And in each of those, except for the 1824 letter, she mentions, I would really love to come visit you, or I wish we could get together, something like that. And my view is, in the book that's not yet published, is that she's had a Catholic girl lifestyle. She's played around a lot. She's been penitent, and I think she really misses Thomas Jefferson in her later years. Why he doesn't write back to her is beyond me. Was he preoccupied with debt at the time? We know he was monstrously in debt. Did he have his own family problems? And he wasn't feeling all that very well, at the time. But it's sort of sad because she's painting a picture of the four corners of the earth, and her Catholic school for girls in Lodi is doing really well at the time. And in some sense, she wants to paint the four corners of the earth, and she leaves a spot for Monticello and the seminary, namely Jefferson's school. Do you have the letter in front of you or no?
Well, I don't have it. I can put it in front of me. If I stop sharing, I can put the letter in front of me.
Yeah, if you want to read the relevant part of it where she asks Jefferson, I don't have the letter in front of me, so I could get it.
Okay. Too. Yes, I do.
Be kind of interesting just for listeners.
Okay, so the letter, do you want me to read the entire letter?
No, just the part where she asks him, about, I wish you could give a depiction.
Oh, I wish much to hear from you and how you go on with your fine seminary. That part, I've had my great saloon painted with the representation of the...
She calls it saloon, it's a salon.
Oh, okay. Parts of the world and the most distinguished objects in them I have at a loss for America, as I found very few small prints. However, Washington town is, and then the letters are just MARB, and I have left a hill barren, as I would place Monticello and the seminary. If you favor me with some description that I might have it introduced, you would oblige me much. I am just setting out for my home. Pray write to me and Lodi, and if this reaches you safe, I will write longer by the same way. Believe me, ever your most obliged and affectionate friend, Maria Cosway.
Yeah, so she leaves a Monticello. She's got this hill, and she leaves a blank spot for a description of Jefferson's house, and she leaves a blank spot where she figures the University of Virginia should be, wishing for just some sort of description so she could paint it. I think she misses Thomas Jefferson. I mean, I don't know this, but was the whole painting the four corners of the earth a way of including Jefferson's Monticello and the University of Virginia, that she really, that was Jeff, get off the computer screen. I mean, get off my computer. So, I mean, in my view, and I can't say I'm right here, I think she really misses Thomas Jefferson, and maybe she's painting that just because she wants to see Monticello. Remember, like I said, the last four letters prior to this, she says, well, I wish I could come see you, or we could meet. So maybe, and Jefferson always invited her to come to Monticello before that. She never took him up.
And so, wow. Yeah, it does seem like in that letter that she's trying, by painting Monticello, that'll bring her closer to him. And
maybe, I mean, that's plausible. At least I think so. I say that because of the other letters. She says in a couple of the other letters, boy, I wish we could get together. And Jefferson always says that too early in the letters, where we could be together. He says, I wish I had the cap of Fortunatus. Fortunatus's cap, you put it on, you can be anywhere you want to go. And that's that. So that's
do we know if he lost interest over the 38 years? Did he lose interest?
I'll explain that as we go on.
Okay. Oh yeah,
not with this question. You just You asked me a question about the
Yeah.
last letter.
I know, and now it's leading to
We'll,
more.
we'll
Okay,
get to that.
stick to the script. Stick to the script. Okay, question number 2. There's really nothing else to do but work backward. How does Maria Cosway respond to Thomas Jefferson's head and heart letter?
Now I can probably answer that letter a little bit. That's okay. That's a good question. That's what what happens after that? Well, Jefferson, when she parts, he writes this tortuously and tortuously, both tortuous and torturous, long letter, fighting head and heart. And, he can't wait for something from her. And she's going back to England and she's in a carriage with John Trumbull. And when she gets to Antwerp, Trumbull writes Jefferson a letter, and Jefferson opens it up and he sees 4 lines from Maria Cosway. And so he writes a letter back immediately. He goes, "Oh my goodness, I opened this up and I see, I wrote this unbelievably large letter. Then I get 4 lines. And I look, and I'm looking again, I count, and it's Maria Cosway, it's 4 lines." He goes, "Oh, well, if I think of you a lot, you think of me very little. I guess that's the way it should be because, you're better than I am. You're more lovable than I am." So he's sort of flabbergasted. Then she gets the letter when she's back in London. And she replies, and I'll read part of it here. She goes, it's a fairly long letter. She goes, "I wish I could answer the dialogue, but I honestly think my heart is invisible and mute at this moment more than it is full or ready to burst with all the sentiments which a very feeling one is capable of, sensible of, so I mean, she wishes she could burst out, but she can't. My heart is invisible and mute." So uh, what's going on with that? Does that mean that Jefferson so overwhelmed her she doesn't know what to say? Possibly. Then she says, talks about all the sentiments which a very feeling one is capable of, sensible of my loss at separating from the friends I left at Paris. I have hardly time to indulge in shameless tribute, but my thoughts must be contrasted by the joy of meeting my friends in London. Jefferson is described by her as one of her friends in Paris, and she's overwhelmed. So she doesn't single him. He writes this whole letter, singles her out, even though he's clumsy in the letter. It's the love letter. And she comes back and says, "Well, of course my heart is broken at leaving you. My heart is broken at at having left all my friends. But I'm compensated because I get to meet my new friends, my old friends back in London." Now you read that, how are you going to feel? It's like, I just told you in my clumsy way how much of an impact you made on my influence you had on my life. And in my clumsy way, I told you I love you. And then you're just telling me I'm one of your friends. So, but she does say, as she always will say, she's excited. She was happy to have gotten such a long letter. And I hope you'll write more letters of that same length. So
Well,
that's the immediate response. And I think that sticks with Jefferson forever.
yeah.
He writes this long letter and he's hoping for some clue that she feels the way he does toward her. And
Right.
she calls him a friend. Might be a
Yeah.
dear friend, but a friend.
Oh,
And she will say in a subsequent letter, she goes, "Isn't it not enough that you would be," I don't have the letter with me, "is it not enough to know that if I could pick out 5 of the most important people, you're included among them?" That's not what you want to hear when you're
right, right.
you're not a friend, you're a good friend.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways,
Oh, yeah, the correspondence probably should have ended there. But maybe that's why he became quiet later on, as time went on. Who knows? He may have ruminated in this for years. Question number 3. Okay, I noticed that the first year of letters is even, and then there is 1787. What happens? And also from 1790 on, Maria Cosway writes 12 letters and Thomas Jefferson only 5. Why is that?
oh, there's a lot to unpack there. Hopefully I can get at that. 1787, she comes back to Paris. and she stays with a Russian countess way on the other side of town. Jefferson is on the northwest side of Paris, just on the outskirts, Hotel de
Okay.
Longueuil. She's on the other side, very far away. Now, the question is, of course, she has a free lodging with this woman. Could she have stayed at a place where she was closer to Jefferson, had larger access? We don't know. Maybe, we don't know what her husband said. Maybe her husband said, I'll let you go back there. He had to know Jefferson's love of her. Maybe the husband got in the way and said, no, you can't. If you're going to go back, you have to stay. Princess Lubomirsky, I think it was, stay far away from Jefferson. Or what I think actually happened is Jefferson's love letter, his billet doux, overwhelmed her. It was too much, too fast. And it's like, okay, I want to go back to Paris to get away. She did not have a happy marriage with her husband. Like I said, he looked like a monkey. He was having sex with all sorts of women. Was she doing the same at the time, having sex with people when he was the official painter to the Prince Regent, Prince of Wales, soon to be the Prince Regent? It's hard to say, but I tend to think that she wanted to stay away from Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson's busy writing his notes on, or trying to get his notes on Virginia published. But when she writes, and we mentioned that in 1787, she writes 7 letters. 1 January, 1 February 15, July 9, then 4 in December, when she's about ready to leave. She's leaving. What can we say? She is writing, she calls herself an enfant gâté, a spoiled child. She is one of those people. Jefferson has a going away party for her before she parts, and he says in one of his letters, I can never approach you except en petit comité, with a little committee of people. You're always, in other words, there's always a flock of guys around you. She's a spoiled brat. She is from studying her early letters in history when she was an upcoming female painter. A lot of the other guys would say she had an overestimation of her physical beauty. She was good looking, but not gorgeous. She was a handsome woman. And from what I gather, she fell in love easily. So she's used to attention. She's a very talented musician and painter and drawer. She's used to attention, and Jefferson's not quite giving her the attention in the epistolary correspondence, and she's mad about that. And then Jefferson also goes on a trip to southern France and northern Italy because he's got his broken wrist and he wants to try mineral springs. And he writes a letter to her where he says, I had a peep into Elysium. Says, I was on this trip, and she's thinking, like, what the hell are you doing on this trip? And, you should be writing me letters. And then he writes in November 13th, he tells Trumbull, I'll read this, it's kind of cool. We tried to get together all the time. It was just, he writes, a fatality has attended my wishes and her and my endeavors to see one another more since she has been here, second time in France. More from the mere effect of chance, she has happened to be from home several times when I've called on her, and when she has called on me, I hope for better luck hereafter. As I interpret that, Jefferson has called on her a few times at the princess's house. She's not to be, maybe she was there and she, I'm not here. He's trying to say chance has intervened. I don't think she wants to see him.
Yeah.
I think it's, too much. You've been in my face too much, It needs to go slower. So that is going on. You say also from 1790 to what's the years from 1805, she cools off and she writes him only he cools off and writes her only 3 letters. She writes him 7 letters, right? And there are some gaps, as you say, right? What else is going on here? 1790, she has a daughter by her husband. And so there was some sex between them. This is the year that King George III, that to whom Jefferson writes in his declarations, uh, um, goes mad. So the prince becomes the prince regent. In effect, he's the king. Well, until his father can get better. After Maria, this is really weird. Now, after Maria has a child, she goes to Italy to recover from a troubling pregnancy without her child. She leaves her child behind so she stays there for 4 years. 1791 to 1792, she's living with the world's most famous singer, Luigi Marchesi, who's a castrato. He's had certain parts of his body cut off so he can sing those high notes, but he is a fop. He dresses beautifully, and everybody wants to see him whenever he's in town. So she's living with him and hanging out. So there's all this sort of scandal going on. And her husband probably at the time is seeing other women and having sex with others. At some point, he goes on a tour with a fairly talented Maria Moser. And he goes on this sort of tour, vacation with her, and they're traveling all around. And he writes in his diary about, yes, I had sex with Mary. She's so much better in bed than my wife. He writes that in a journal. And the journal is lost, but we do have reference. I have reference to that. So in 4 years, and I'm not picking on Catholics here. I was, born Catholic, but she's a Catholic in the sense. I go back to her childhood. Remember, she was brought up in the inn where there's all sorts of stuff going on. You can get up the picture of the inn if you want.
Okay. Hold on, let me share the screen and I'll go back to the
second picture right after Maria.
Okay, this one.
Yeah, that is Thomas Patch, who was a painter who draws. And if you look at the painting, the paintings are on the wall in the back are of Dionysus, the god of drunkenness and sexual orgy, and Silenus, who on the right, the god of Silenus, who was a sort of companion to Dionysus. Now, the statue in the middle is the dancing faun, linked with merriment and drunkenness. The artist, Thomas Patch, is on the wall, high up on the wall on the right. He's got a faun's ears, and fawns would be hanging around Bacchanalian revelry. The guy with the big punch bowl is Maria's father, right? His name was Charles, I believe. He's carrying a punch bowl. We have you notice how Patch is more comfortable painting people from the side than he is from the front, and he only paints. So we have people in various stages of, if you look carefully at the bottom, if viewers can see that, there are all sorts of bottles of booze sitting on the ground, some broken. So there's all sorts of drunkenness going on at the time, right? And
the beginning of the Vulcan.
Yeah, I say that to show that the environment of the inn was one of debauchery, one of drunkenness and fun. Maria sent away, as I said last time, to a convent. So these polarities of being in an environment where people are drunk and having a lot of fun, and then being cast off to the convent, right? Because this is not appropriate, where none of that is going on. This, you have pictures of her artwork. I'll give you a couple pictures too.
Yeah.
We can go to them next.
This one?
Yeah, this is Crusa appearing to Aeneas, the Roman hero, right? The equivalent to Odysseus. Now you see on the right, we see Aeneas and Crusa, who is dead at the time. She's of the other world. She's a bright, beautiful. And you also notice in her artwork, there's plenty of activity, plenty of circular motion. There's a lot of vivacity that's missing from her husband's work, who focused on miniatures. And so we talked about the dream last night, where Maria talked about this dream where, the Virgin Mother came through the clouds and called me through. So you always have this tension between the heaven and then the world that I see you think here. And I think it represents Crusa represents heaven and the convent, and Aeneas represents, the end and the real world and the partying going on. And, she goes and she's hanging out with Luigi Marchesi. Are they having sex? Because he's a castrato doesn't mean he can't have sex. He's not going to get her pregnant. But so, I mean, and look at the next picture. This was in 1781, I think, 782. This is a famous painting. She painted the Duchess of Devonshire. And using after you see the soul flow and dynamism coming through the clouds. But isn't this a lot like Maria Cosway's dream, where the Virgin Mary came through the clouds and called me and wanted to pick me up? And you have to think that in this painting, that dream is part of the motivation of this painting. Again, we see heaven and dynamism and a lot of flow and circularity and stuff, a lot of energy in her painting. So I think, we could go away from the paintings now, but I think that this polarity is with her all of her life, right? They would have parties at her husband's house called Schomburg House, and the idea is that people would come to see Maria, who was talented. She wrote her own music. She was an excellent musician as well as a painter, and her husband didn't allow her to paint. So when the people would come for the parties every week, she would sort of seduce the guys through her singing and her music, and the guys would want to come to see her. And Richard would avail himself. Hey, by the way, you're here. Do you want your portrait painted and stuff? So it would be a sort of money-making gathering.
Well, I think you're kind of answering question 4, because question 4 was, there are gaps in the correspondence from 1790 to 1794, 1795 to 1801, and especially 1805 to 1819. Why is that? What is Thomas Jefferson doing? And you just now
I am answering
Cosway
that. So doing. I mean, I didn't anticipate your 4th question, but I'm trying. So I'm trying to answer that too. I mean, there's a lot going on with Maria.
Yeah.
Like I said, she has a child. She goes away from her child for 4 years, and
that was 1790 when she had the child.
Yeah, and the child dies.
And that looks like that's when the correspondence from Thomas Jefferson slowed down.
That's when she's busy, and Jefferson's busy too, because he soon gets into.
Well, hers in 1790, she was still 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. She wrote 7 letters. He only wrote 3. Maybe he backed off once she had a baby.
I don't think the baby really had anything to do with it. I think he's backing off anyways. He's realizes he's politically active at the time. He's Secretary of State pretty soon and Vice President. He's going to be president shortly. He's got a lot to do, and he can't. Jefferson said, while he was involved as a politician, he says the letters he said the letters you want to write the most are the letters that you can't write. You've got to answer the politically important letters first, and then only write the letters that you want to write to your family and loved ones. So, so Maria Jefferson winds up being busy. Maria too, she enters a convent after her stint with Marchesi for a little while before she goes back. Her husband will die eventually, and she's actually taking care of. There's some sort of reconciliation, like he's having sex with the other painter while she's gone. There's some sort of reconciliation in that she comes back and will take care of the family. Her daughter dies, and I point out in my commentary, her daughter's name was, what the heck was her name? Let's see, do I have it somewhere here written down? Louisa. She dies in 1796. She's 6 years old, and that certainly breaks her heart. But she consistently, in her letters to Jefferson, so forth, talks of her as doesn't use the name Louisa. She talks of the child, my daughter. He does not my daughter, but my child or the child. She uses the child, not my child.
Yeah.
She wasn't a very good mother.
Right, yeah.
She was a terrible mother, and that's all I can gather from that. And so you wonder if her opening up this convent, she starts a school for Catholic girls in 1805, then the one in Lodi gets opened in 1811. Is she going to the, uh, is she penitent? Is she
Right.
doing penance? Is
Right.
she doing confession? Right? A Catholic girl has to go to confessional. Is the convent in the school a confessional? And you notice in 4 of the last 5 letters, she says, I wish you were with me, Thomas Jefferson. So what does that, I mean, I think what happens, and I talk of this in my book, The World Without Thomas Jefferson, too. Jefferson, as a ghost, gets to meet Maria Cosway, Cosway that never met Jefferson. But I think what happens is that when after her daughter dies and she starts taking care of her husband as he gets to be a bit senile, she becomes sort of the ideal woman for Jefferson at the time. Jefferson always, what does a woman do? You take care of the house and you take care of your womanly duties, and the man takes care of his manly duties. She sort of grows up and becomes that, hey, I've been playing around and having a lot of fun and doing whatever I want to do. And that was all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The convent really is. It's not the inn. I've been in the inn, and as with Marchese, the convent's really where it's at for me. And I need to do my penance. I'm going to open the school, and she's delighted when Jefferson's talking about opening up his school, right? And at some point, in the last letter, she goes, "Give me." She doesn't call it University of Virginia. She calls it his seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got her own seminary for girls, and Jefferson's got his own seminary for adults, young boys.
Oh, well,
So
so
I
that
mean,
leads, oh,
is
that's,
she doing that in some sense because she knows Jefferson was always interested in educating? Education was dear to Jefferson.
right.
Um, it's both penance and I think sort of emulation of Jefferson at the same time. Now she opens up her school much prior to the opening of the idea, but Jefferson's talking about education, and always, and these ideas are fermenting in his head. So I think the school becomes a convent. I think what happens, tell me if you like this. This is surmise on my part. I think Jefferson is madly in love with her initially. Her response immediately cools him off, and he realized, I did it again, just like Rebecca Burwell. I was trying to tell her I love her. Will you marry me? I couldn't even get the words out. Everything screwed up, and within a few months after, she's married to somebody else. He was very, very clumsy, and I think the billet doux, the love letter, is evidence of his clumsiness. He can't even say I love you. He's got to have a debate. If that doesn't show you this guy is really awkward and gauche around women, I think he's in love with her. He still holds out hope in several letters that, well, maybe we can get together. And, if ever you come see Monticello, maybe you'll realize this is just a great life. But you're going to tell a gal who's been used to hanging around an inn and drunkenness and hanging around with the jet set, as it were today, come down to Monticello and, be the woman of my house. She would be thinking at the time, oh, I can't think of anything that bores me more. Live in the country on a little hill
Yeah.
when I could be hanging out, with globally important musicians and artists, and But I think later, when she settles down and she, sort of realizes that, I need to go and open up my school, be a good wife, insofar as I can be a wife to a person whom I don't love and who doesn't love me. And I think she's in love with Thomas Jefferson in a different, not a lustful way when she's older. I think she's in love with Thomas Jefferson by the time she dies.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't explain why she says 4 times in 4 straight letters, I wish, we could be together, or I wish, I could visit, or you could visit. She says that in 4 straight letters. And if you read, the copy of the book I gave you, you'll see that. So, the way I tell the story, I don't know if I'm right? And I have to say that. It's a really cool love story.
Yeah.
Unrequited love at first. She doesn't love him back. And then all of a sudden, she is in love with him in a different sort of way, in a sort of way that Jefferson wanted her to love him all the time. And he's not in love with her. He's too busy. He's got his grandkids.
It would make a good Hallmark movie.
Oh, it sure as hell would, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I agree with you. I just think it's a great story.
Well, before we run out of time, I want to ask question number 5. Does she ever get the description of Monticello in the seminary to paint?
No. How's that for a brief answer before we run out of time?
No. Okay. Well,
there's no evidence whatsoever. My guess is I've looked online, and there's a web page for the school that she has, and never any indication that I suspect. And again, this is surmise that she leaves the Hill Bear, and she leaves a bare spot for where UVA would have been. So it's sort of sad. And it's only appropriate, isn't it? Her heart is broken at the end. Yeah. She's alone. Her husband's dead. She's got the young girls. But, she has a small room to which she retires when she's done at the end of the day. And, now the picture you have up right now is a miniature when John Trumbull, the young artist who would be the artist of the American Revolution for Thomas Jefferson, painted the Declaration of Independence, and he painted most of the figures' faces. You can look that up. Anybody can look that up easily. He uses the portrait of Jefferson in this small painting that he makes to make 3 miniatures of Jefferson. So he makes this one, which reveals Jefferson as just a sort of Virginian. He doesn't have the powdered wig on. I have one up in my office where he's got the powdered wig on and he's more formally dressed. But you've got Jefferson. You noticed he's got if you want to analyze this, you see what sort of expression does Jefferson have? If you look at the face, what would you say? How would you describe his face? Well,
he's very serious.
Serious. He's looking, and the eyes are, if you look at the eyes that Trumbull gives, it's a young man that's sort of, he's mulling over a problem, it seems to me, something like that. His attention is focused. He's got a very serious expression. So it's, when he's looking in a particular direction, there's a slant of the head and so forth. It's a wonderful picture. I really love this picture. It's on one of my books. I don't remember which book. I used it for a cover.
Oh.
It's a wonderful picture. But Trumbull paints 3 of these and leaves one with Maria. Okay. And Maria does say at some point in one of her letters, and I don't have the exact thing, she goes, I have it on the wall next to the place where I do my work, by the fireplace. So she's got this miniature of Thomas Jefferson.
I wonder why John Trumbull gave one to Maria.
Well, for obvious reasons, because when, Trumbull was involved in this exchange of letters, he was oftentimes the messenger boy. He's staying for free with Thomas Jefferson at Jefferson's Hotel Longueuil, where Sally Hemings is supposed to be having sex with him. Trumbull's there. William Small is there. William Short, and all sorts of other, Carlos Williamos. Sally Hemings is supposed to be there too, having sex with Jefferson all the time, and no one sees it. But shows you what kind of guy Jefferson was. He's got Trumbull over there staying with him so he can suck in the environment of Paris and paint or study art.
Okay, so John Trumbull was the go-between then.
Was a go-between, and Maria probably wanted a picture of Jefferson, and he understood that when she parted that he got a picture of her. It's a wonderful love story for Valentine's Day. I hope everybody who watched this really enjoys. The page,
like and share. Please like the video if you enjoyed it.